Chapter 1436. 18 Domains. Experts gathered here, and demigods were everywhere. 1,000 years ago, a miracle appeared here. It was said that it was a miracle created by a drop of true God's blood. True gods were unreachable existences to anyone. No matter how powerful a heaven-defying sovereign was, he was still a sovereign, not even a demigod. Demigods were just stronger bugs, unable to break free from their shackles, drifting with the flow, not knowing where their future lay. Only a true god could tear off all shackles and be unrestrained. The supreme chaotic will could only suppress them, but could not force them to do things they did not like to do. The true god's blood contained the god's law and divine power. Yi Chen gradually understood that the god's law was formed by the fusion of different laws. Every true god's law was different, and divine power was even more precious. If one could absorb a bit of divine power, they might become a demigod, and a demigod might become a beginner demigod. On the boundless plain, there was a huge crater. Inside the crater, there were densely packed buildings. These buildings were different from ordinary buildings. They were made of crystal, and they looked like colorful lights. The huge buildings were hidden in the clouds, faintly discernible like phantoms. Swoosh, 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 many figures flew into the clouds. There were heaven-defying sovereigns, beginner demigods and intermediate demigods. Entering the clouds, one could see that there was a world inside. The buildings were huge, as if they were the residences of gods, making people feel small. In a vast plaza, a heaven-defying supreme was engaged in a fierce battle with a mid-level demigod. Tiger Fong sovereign, hand over the divine crystal now, or you will die without a burial place. The intermediate demigod with an extremely powerful aura shouted, Meng Kong battle saint with just you? Tiger Fong sovereign sneered. The saber in his hand flashed, and a large amount of lightning bolts shot out. These lightning bolts seemed to have a mind of their own. No matter how Meng Kong battle saint tried to dodge, he could not escape from the lightning bolts. His body was charred black by the lightning bolts, and there were even burn marks on his body. Damn it! Xiong Kong battle saint glanced at Supreme Tiger Fong with fear. He had never fought against her before, but he had heard from others that she was extremely powerful, and had comprehended the law of thunder. However, he did not expect her to be this powerful. Both of them were law powers, but the destructive power of the law of thunder was simply unheard of. Perhaps only a few laws could surpass the law of thunder. Supreme Tiger Fong, if you can receive this punch of mine, I'll spare your life. The injuries on his body healed in an instant. The ominous space battle saint let out a loud roar and punched out at Honorable Tiger Fong. The majestic fist energy contained the will of a mid-level demigod. As expected of a mid-level half-deity, Supreme Tiger Fong didn't dare to be careless. Thunder and lightning surrounded his body, and in the next moment, his entire body turned into a bolt of lightning, instantly escaping from the range of the fist energy. Coward. The ominous space battle saint mumbled unwillingly, then turned around and left. There were too many heaven-defying supremes and demigods in the miraculous sight. Battles were happening all the time. Sometimes it was the heaven-defying supremes who were killed, and sometimes it was the low-level demigods who were killed. Of course, there were also many situations where neither side could defeat the other. The only thing that had never happened was that no mid-level demigod had fallen. Mid-level demigods were too powerful. Some of the terrifying heaven-defying supremes might not be weaker than ordinary mid-level demigods in terms of attack power. But in terms of foundation, even 100 heaven-defying supremes couldn't compare to a mid-level demigod. You might be able to slightly injure a mid-level demigod, but to kill one would be as difficult as ascending the heavens. 100 years later, Yi Chen also arrived at the 18 domains. I didn't expect there to be a miraculous sight in the primal chaos battlefield. Yi Chen exclaimed in surprise, then flew into the clouds. When he reappeared, Yi Chen was in front of a palace. The palace gate was tightly shut, and there were 2 stone lions in front of the gate. One of the stone lions suddenly enlarged and bit at Yi Chen. Swish! With his body turning transparent, Yi Chen dodged the stone lion's attack. At this moment, the other stone lion spread its wings and pounced at Yi Chen. It was even faster than the previous stone lion, as fast as lightning. Swish, swish, swish. After a fierce battle, Yi Chen shattered the stone lion's body, and the rubble scattered on the ground. Pushing open the palace gate, Yi Chen entered. In the palace, a crystal floated there, emitting a mesmerizing halo. Bathed in the halo, Yi Chen felt like his essence, qi, and spirit were like a baby, greedily breathing in. Godforce crystal. Yi Chen reacted immediately. Without any hesitation, Yi Chen reached out and grabbed the Godforce crystal. The next moment, the Godforce crystal sank into Yi Chen's body, and at the same time, Yi Chen's body emitted a faint halo. Frowning slightly, Yi Chen didn't know whether obtaining the Godforce crystal was a blessing or a curse. In a short time, he couldn't refine the Godforce crystal, so naturally, he couldn't get rid of the halo. And if he couldn't get rid of the halo, he would easily become a fat meat in the eyes of others. As long as they killed him, they could seize the Godforce crystal in his body. Forget it, I'll take it one step at a time. The Godforce crystal could allow Yi Chen's cultivation to rise to the quasi-demigod level faster. It would be a pity to give it up. Basically, every palace had a Godforce crystal. Of course, there were also some palaces that had been taken by others, and the stone lions in front of the gate were shattered on the ground. The miracle site could be entered from all directions. Gradually, Yi Chen went deep into the hinterland of the buildings, and he would often run into other heaven-defying supremes, or beginner demigods. Most of the heaven-defying supremes restrained each other. Unless they were extremely confident in themselves, they generally wouldn't fight with heaven-defying supremes. After all, heaven-defying supremes used the power of law, which consumed a lot of energy. If they didn't have to use it, they wouldn't use it. Frequent fights would only make them weaker and weaker, and they would become fat meat in the eyes of others. As for beginner demigods, they didn't care so much. As long as they ran into a heaven-defying supremacy that they hadn't seen before, they would attack tentatively. If they couldn't win, they would fight, and if they couldn't, they would flee. After all, there were very few heaven-defying supremes that could kill beginner demigods quickly, even fewer than intermediate demigods. Looking at the 3 beginner demigods flying in front of him, Yi Chen raised his sword and charged over, courting death. Seeing that Yi Chen was so arrogant, the other party was instantly enraged, and one by one, they exploded with astonishing battle prowess. Boom, boom, boom. Airwaves surged as the 4 of them fought in a frenzy. Fighting 1 against 3, Yi Chen wasn't at a disadvantage at all, but he also couldn't suppress the other party. In fact, among the heaven-defying supremes, his strength was only above average. If he had the strength of Tiger Fang's supremacy, he could easily kill the 3 beginner demigods. The Godforce crystal is melting faster. As the battle entered a white-hot stage, Yi Chen discovered that the Godforce crystal was melting faster and faster. The reason why he chose to fight head-on with the 3 beginner demigods was that he wanted to use the battle to refine the Godforce crystal. Using the power of law was a huge burden on heaven-defying supremes, and the Godforce crystal could completely make up for it. Chapter 1437. Battle Sage Song He, Battle Sage Yu Tian, Battle Sage Dong Yin, I'm here to help you. Right at this moment, another primary demigod charged over from the distance. This primary demigod had ant-like antennae on his head, and his eyes were compound. His teeth were incomparably sharp, carrying an evil aura. Both of his hands were crisscrossing, and one sharp disc after another shot toward Yi Chen. Black Ant Battle Sage. The 3 of them turned around and revealed looks of joy. Black Ant Battle Sage was a peak elementary demigod. Apart from some terrifying sovereign paragons, there were very few sovereign paragons who were his match. His disc could even restrain some extremely fast sovereign paragons. Another one? Yi Chen frowned slightly and swept the firmament sword to deflect the incoming discs. After the discs were deflected, they danced around Yi Chen, and it was difficult to get rid of them. Fighting 1 against 4, Yi Chen gradually fell into a disadvantageous position. The main reason was that Black Ant Battle Saint's disc was too annoying, distracting him quite a bit. Meteor Frisbee. All of a sudden, more discs appeared around Black Ant Battle Saint. These discs were like a meteor shower, crazily shooting toward Yi Chen. Due to their extreme speed, they even created friction with the space-time of the chaos battlefield, bursting forth with dazzling radiance. Amazing! Just by sensing it, Yi Chen knew that he couldn't block Black Ant Battle Sage's killing move, and he couldn't escape the attack's range with his water travel art. The firmament sword swept out, and sword light swept out like waves. The meteor frisbee entered the waves, and its speed decreased sharply. In the end, only 7 or 8 discs hit Yi Chen, and the sound of metal clashing could be heard. Relying on the Xian Wu Saint armor and the immortal sword body, Yi Chen wasn't seriously injured, and he only spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. Sky Saint artifact armor. Black Ant Battle Sage's eyes lit up. He, a peak elementary demigod, didn't have a Sky Saint artifact armor, but his opponent did. I only want the Sky Saint artifact armor. You can have the God Crystal, Black Ant Battle Sage said. I don't think that's appropriate. Although the Divine Power Crystal is precious, it's more than 10 times less valuable than a Heavenly Sage artifact. Battle Sage Song he expressed a different opinion. That's right, Black Ant Battle Sage, you have to show your sincerity. Battle Sage Hata also said. Black Ant Battle Saint clenched his teeth. I will compensate you with 2 divinity crystals. How about it? If a demigod wanted to improve, it would take a long time, but divine power crystals could save a lot of time. 6 divine power crystals could save at least tens of thousands of years of bitter cultivation, which made Black Ant Battle Sage's heart ache. Deal. The 3 of them knew that they couldn't push their luck. Dang dang dang. Attracted by the Xian Wu sacred armor, Black Ant Battle Sage put in even more effort. After all, he was a peak elementary demigod. Once he used his ultimate and killer moves, Yi Chen would have a hard time blocking them. If not for Yi Chen's immortal sword body, he wouldn't have been able to resist for so long with just the Xian Wu sacred armor. After all, there were strong and weak elementary demigods. A truly powerful elementary demigod like Black Ant Battle Sage was many times stronger than an ordinary elementary demigod. Hand over the Sky Saint artifact armor and the Divine Power Crystal. If we're in a good mood, we might let you go. Don't be so stubborn. Battle Sage Dong Yin planned to break Yi Chen's will to fight. After all, Yi Chen wasn't weak. Even if the 4 of them worked together, it would take a long time to defeat him. It was better to deal with him as soon as possible. If you have the ability, then defeat me for real. Don't waste your breath. Yi Chen wasn't stupid. Handing over the Xian Wu sacred armor was tantamount to seeking death. His immortal sword body could only resist the attacks of a quasi-demigod. You're courting death. The 4 of them were furious and attacked with all their might. Soon a day had passed. Yi Chen's aura had dimmed significantly. In his body, the divine power crystal's replenishment rate couldn't keep up with its consumption rate. In another 3 or 4 days, he would die of exhaustion. 2 days later, Yi Chen's aura weakened again. He can't hold on much longer. Battle Sage Tian said while attacking. Now that he voluntarily handed over the Sky Saint artifact armor and the divine power crystal, we can't let him go. He wasted so much of our time. Battle Sage Dong Yin said hatefully. The halo around Yi Chen's body was very strong. There were at least 6 or 7 divine power crystals. In addition to the 6 divine power crystals promised by Battle Sage Black Ant, each of them could get about 4. This was a great harvest. The only depressing thing was that Yi Chen was too tanky with the Sky Saint artifact armor. What the 4 of them didn't know was that the 3 level 9 sword souls in Yi Chen's Sea of Soul were being nourished by the divine power crystal and were undergoing a transformation. It should be known that divine power was the amalgamation of all kinds of energy, and sword intent was one of them. If it was just a single sword intent, it definitely wouldn't be able to transform so quickly. However, Yi Chen had 3 supreme level 9 sword intents, and they resonated with each other. Now that they were being nourished by the divine power crystal, they were quietly transforming. Go to hell. Battle Sage Black Ant used the shooting star frisbee again. Countless meteors shot toward Yi Chen. Sorry, it's my turn this time. 3 powerful sword intents suddenly radiated from Yi Chen's body. Among these 3 sword intents, one was deep and violent, exuding the aura of annihilation. One was pure and flawless, exuding the true essence of immortality. The last one was radiant, no filth could hide in front of it. It was the same billowing wave sword, but this time, it was like a heavenly river, vast and majestic. The shooting star frisbee collided with the river water, and its speed was drastically reduced. As the river water slammed into it again and again, the shooting star frisbee was forced back, causing Battle Sage Black Ant and the other three to be battered and exhausted. One of Battle Sage Dongyun's arms was even sliced off. Supreme Mid-9th Level 9 Sword Intense 3? Battle Sage Songhe's eyes almost popped out. There were many people who possessed Supreme Martial Intense. Among heaven-defying paragons, 9 out of 10 would have Supreme Martial Intense. However, he had never heard of anyone who possessed 3. Even if Qin Wentian was a reincarnated true divinity, it was still too ridiculous. Damn it. Battle Sage Black Ant was extremely unwilling to accept this. He switched to another killing move and attacked Yi Chen. Unfortunately, the 3 Supreme Sword Intense had been upgraded from the early 9th level to the mid-9th level, causing Yi Chen's strength to rise by leaps and bounds. Let alone Battle Sage Black Ant, who was a peak elementary demigod. Even a peak elementary demigod might not be able to do anything to Yi Chen. One must know that the Destruction Sword Intent allowed Yi Chen's attack power to rise, and the Immortal Sword Intent allowed Yi Chen's Immortal Sword body to rise by another level. With his strength rising by leaps and bounds, Yi Chen instantly gained the upper hand. Previously, he was unable to block Battle Sage Black Ant's killing move even with his full strength. But now he could effortlessly crush it. Swish! A blood-red sword shadow shot out from Yi Chen's right eye, sinking into Battle Sage Dongyun's soul sea. Battle Sage Dongyun let out a miserable scream as blood flowed out of his 7 apertures. After the Destruction Sword Intent was upgraded to the mid-9th level, the might of the Sword of Hell had increased by leaps and bounds. It could already injure the soul of an elementary demigod. After transforming into a water man, Yi Chen wielded the Firmament Sword and slashed through Battle Sage Dongyun's body. Pooh! Battle Sage Dongyun's body split apart as his martial Dao Yuan Shun was directly destroyed. The combination of the Destruction Sword Intent and the Sky Saint weapon, the Firmament Sword, was extremely tyrannical. Chapter 1438. Let's go! Black Ant Battle Sage made a prompt decision and left. He was neither a mid-level demigod nor Yi Chen. Right now, he was no match for Yi Chen. If he was hit by the Sky Saint weapon, even if he didn't die, he would be crippled. This was why he wanted the Sky Saint armor. With it, even a mid-level demigod wouldn't be able to hurt him in a short time. Let's go! Seeing Black Ant Battle Sage leave, Battle Sage Hata and Battle Sage Songhe fled in a hurry. Before, the 4 of them weren't a match for Yi Chen. Now, only the 2 of them were left. There are fewer and fewer shortcomings. Exhaling, Yi Chen didn't chase after them. As the 3 Supreme Sword Intense broke through to mid-9th step, Yi Chen knew that the gap between him and those truly frightening heaven-defying sovereigns was getting smaller and smaller. Half of his current strength was due to the Sky Saint artifact Firmament Sword. Without it, and before his sword intent broke through, he would at most be a mid-level heaven-defying sovereign. As for the truly frightening heaven-defying sovereigns, their cultivation base was at least at the quasi-demigod level. This was something Yi Chen couldn't hope to reach. However, with the God Power Crystal, he felt that he wasn't far from breaking through. After collecting the God Force crystals that escaped from Battle Sage Wintercloud's body, Yi Chen now had 10 God Force crystals in his body. Up until now, he had only used up 1% of one God Force crystal. There were countless palaces in the Divine Ruin. The bigger the palace, the more God Force crystals there were. But at the same time, the lion statues outside were stronger. As for how many God Force crystals there were in the Divine Ruin, Yi Chen couldn't guess. The Divine Ruin was simply too big. From the outside, it looked like it was only 1% of the size of the 18 domains. In fact, the Divine Ruin had its own space inside, which was bigger than the 18 domains. After dozens of years, the number of God Power crystals in his body had reached 40. His whole body was like a small sun. Wherever he went, a halo of light would shine. In the past few decades, Yi Chen had already refined 10 Divine Force crystals, and his martial Yuan soul was faintly glowing with a faint golden light. With one more step, his silver yuan soul would transform into a gold yuan soul. This was a palace that was over 1,000 meters tall. The 2 stone lions outside the palace looked extraordinary, like the mounts of gods. When Yi Chen approached, the stone lion on the right let out a loud roar, and its huge body suddenly became alive. The sound of blood flowing was like a monstrous wave, emitting a domineering aura that looked down on the world. Immediately after, the stone lion on the left resurrected. The 2 stone lions that had come to life attacked Yi Chen from the left and right. So powerful, Yi Chen felt an extreme pressure. The strength of these 2 stone lions was almost the same as his. Their bodies were impervious to swords and spears, and it was impossible to break them. After fighting for several days and nights, Yi Chen finally destroyed the bodies of the 2 stone lions. At this moment, he was close to his limit. Fortunately, he had the divine power crystal to quickly nourish him. Creak. Pushing open the palace gate, Yi Chen walked in. 1 divine power crystal, 2 divine power crystals, 5 divine power crystals floated in the palace, and in addition, surrounded by the divine power crystals, there was a whirlwind full of spirituality. Wind law fragment. Generally, law fragments would not appear in the void. They would only appear in the saint artifact source, or in the soul sea of supremes and demigods. Under normal circumstances, law fragments would automatically dissipate once they left the saint artifact or the soul sea. There was no way to preserve them for a long time. The appearance of a wind law fragment here was really beyond Yi Chen's expectations. Putting away the divine power crystal, Yi Chen sized up the wind law fragment. He did not know how to use the wind law fragment. Reaching out his hand, Yi Chen tried to touch the wind law fragment. Chi 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 chi. As soon as the seemingly gentle wind law fragment touched Yi Chen's finger, it instantly went berserk. The violent whirlwind cut Yi Chen's finger, and the power was no less than a heaven-defying supremacy's all-out attack. Frowning, Yi Chen quickly withdrew his hand. With his strength, he did not need to be afraid of the wind law fragment, but he did not want to exhaust the power of the wind law fragment. Without a source of power, its power would be depleted every time it exerted its power. This was different from the water law fragment in Yi Chen's soul sea, or the law fragment in the heavenly saint artifact source. That's right, the heavenly saint artifact. Yi Chen's eyes lit up, and he pulled out the firmament sword. The firmament sword contained the law of water, the law of wind, and the law of space. Yi Chen hoped to use the law of wind to attract the wind law fragment. The tip of the firmament sword slowly came into contact with the wind law fragment. To Yi Chen's surprise, the wind law fragment did not resist too much, as if it was treating the firmament sword as a stranger. Yi Chen did not dare to be too hasty, so he gave the firmament sword and the wind law fragment enough time to cultivate feelings. Gradually, Yi Chen could feel that the wind law fragment no longer resisted the firmament sword, and it truly treated the firmament sword as a partner. After a slight hesitation, Yi Chen inserted the firmament sword deep into the core of the wind law fragment, and then activated the firmament sword with all his might, activating the power of the wind law. Chapter 1439. Putting away the 6 divine force crystals. The halo around Yi Chen's body became even more brilliant. However, at this moment, his attention was completely focused on the water law fragment. Any law was broad and profound. To fully comprehend it, it would take an endless amount of time. The law comprehended by a heaven-defying supreme was at most 1% of a complete law, or even less. The water law fragment in front of him was about the same size as the one in Yi Chen's soul sea. If he could successfully absorb it, the power of the law of water would double. In this way, even if he encountered someone who had comprehended a powerful law, Yi Chen would have the power to fight. The law of water filled the air. Yi Chen's palm was wrapped in a layer of water as he slowly approached the water droplet in the void. Buzz! The water droplet rippled as if it was testing. When it sensed that Yi Chen had something that attracted it, the ripples also covered Yi Chen. The entire interior of the palace seemed to have become a world of water, separated from the outside world. Soaking in the water, Yi Chen completely released his power of the law of water, intertwining with the power of the law of water, released by the water droplet. Gradually, The water droplet moved towards the space between Yi Chen's eyebrows. After an unknown amount of time, the water droplet stuck to the space between Yi Chen's eyebrows, and half of it had already entered his flesh. If one could see through it, they would find that there was a water thread connecting the water droplet in Yi Chen's soul sea and the water droplet between his eyebrows. The water thread gradually tightened, and the distance between the two water droplets was getting closer and closer. When the two water droplets came into contact with each other, an earth-shattering sound came from the palace. The violent water current tumbled and shook, and Yi Chen, who was in the water current, was surrounded by an absolutely calm zone. The water current tumbled more and more violently, and the palace shook. After a long time, everything came to an abrupt stop. In the palace, Yi Chen forcefully exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. With a flip of his wrist, a huge water ball formed. Whether it was the speed of formation or the quality, it was far better than before. The power of any law is broad and profound. Although the law of water is inferior to the other laws in terms of offense, its effects are not inferior at all. Yi Chen suddenly turned into a waterman. Without a sound, the waterman scuttled around the palace. His speed was twice as fast as before. I wonder what level my strength is at now. Seriously speaking, the heaven-defying supremes were divided into two major levels. The first level of heaven-defying supremes could fight against beginner demigods, while the second level of heaven-defying supremes could fight against mid-level demigods. There was a huge difference in strength between the same level. For example, some could only fight against the most ordinary beginner demigods, while some could kill beginner demigods. This was the difference between the first and second level. No matter how powerful a beginner demigod was, he would have to flee in panic if he encountered a mid-level demigod. However, the second level of heaven-defying supremes could fight against mid-level demigods. Yi Chen did not know if he had reached the second level, because he had no reference. Before this, Yi Chen estimated that he should be at the peak of the first level. He was not sure if he had reached the peak of the first level, but the difference should not be too big. The closer he got to the core of the miracle, the more heaven-defying supremes and demigods there were. Yi Chen was not a saint. He took the initiative to attack a few times, and killed a heaven-defying supremes and two beginner demigods. The number of divine power crystals in his body had reached 90. The vast and dazzling halo could be seen and felt from far away. It was like the moon in the night sky, with nowhere to hide. However, Yi Chen was not the only one who was eye-catching. There were many who were as eye-catching as he was, and some were even more eye-catching than him. The number of divine power crystals in his body was estimated to be hundreds. Rumble, none of them were easy to deal with. They all looked for prey to kill. The strong looked for the weak, and the weak looked for the weaker ones. Of course, there were many fights between the strong. Yi Chen was a little speechless. He thought he was already very strong, but he was still targeted by a heaven-defying supremes. I am Supremacy Silver Radiance. It is your honor to die by my hands. This heaven-defying supremacy was tall and perfect. His whole body was silver, as if it was made of silver. Without a doubt, he was the heaven-defying supremacy of Emperor Sky Cosmos. Emperor Sky Cosmos was one of the top existences in countless cosmos, slightly better than Ancient Cosmos and Sky Tyrant Cosmos. I am Honorable Swordsman Green Lotus. Please enlighten me. Since he could not avoid it, Yi Chen had to prove to his opponent that he was not a pushover. Die! A golden armor appeared on Supremacy Silver Radiance's body, and a golden spear appeared in his hand. What made Yi Chen squint was that the golden spear in his opponent's hand was not an ordinary golden spear. The body and the tip of the spear were covered in flames. Metal rule and fire rule. Dual rule supremes. No wonder he is so arrogant and confident. Yi Chen frowned. Last time, he had seen a supremacy who had comprehended two rules. However, he had run far away and did not have the chance to face him. Puff! With the flaming gold spear in his hand, Supremacy Silver Radiance thrust forward. The explosive speed was as fast as a spark. Chapter 1440. Above ground level. Huge yellow figures patrolled the area. Once they discovered an intruder, they would attack as a group. These yellow figures were extremely powerful, and their defense was also extremely high. Normally, it would take a very long time for a first-stage heaven-defying Supreme Master and an ordinary elementary demigod to kill one of them. The Earth Law Guards were completely formed by the power of the Earth Law. Unlike the Earth Law fragments, the Earth Law Guards couldn't absorb them. Whoosh! As Yi Chen moved forward, Firmament Sword was like a formless stream. The Earth Law Guards would disintegrate at the slightest touch. His Water Law realm had doubled. Yi Chen's Water Law Sword art had already surpassed its original realm. All of you scram. In the distance, a dazzling light suddenly rushed over. Along the way, a large number of Earth Law Guards were vaporized. Some heaven-defying supremacy and demigod who couldn't dodge in time were even more miserable. They didn't even have the time to scream before they exploded with light. Their divine power crystals sucked away. Coincidentally, Yi Chen was right in the path of the dazzling light. Not good. Yi Chen quickly turned into a waterman and flew away. Puff! 1/5 of the waterman was vaporized, and the rest flew far away before stopping. Hey, interesting. Forget it, I'll spare your life. The dazzling light didn't slow down and continued forward. When it reached the stairs leading to the first underground level, a yellow figure that was 10 times taller than the ordinary Earth Law Guard stopped it. Of course, it only stopped it for a moment. However, this moment allowed Yi Chen to clearly see the other's appearance. It was a heaven-defying supremacy from the crystal universe. Its whole body was made of transparent crystals, and the divine power halo it emitted was 10 times brighter than Yi Chen's. Roughly speaking, it probably had more than 1,000 divine power crystals in its body. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so dazzling. However, the dazzling light didn't come from the divine power crystals, but the light law power, which was one of the top laws. In less than half a breath's time, the Earth Law Guard leader melted and turned into a beam of light, disappearing from the stairs. It's the Crystal Universe's Light Law Guard leader. He's even stronger than the rumors say. As expected of one of the 5 great supremacies of the primal chaos battlefield, each of them is heaven-defying. Compared to them, we can't be called heaven-defying supremacies. Everyone discussed animatedly, their tones filled with respect. Exalted Light, one of the 5 great paragons? Hearing everyone's discussion, Yi Chen was very surprised. This light supreme being was the strongest heaven-defying supreme being that Yi Chen had ever seen. Compared to him, Silver Radiance supreme being was much weaker. He had never thought that there were 4 heaven-defying supreme beings at this level. They were called the 5 great supreme beings. That was close. Luckily, he didn't target me. Losing 1/5 of his body was not a big deal to Yi Chen. It was just that he had used up some of his sword energy. The profoundness of the water traversing technique was not something that ordinary people could understand. Of course, the main thing was that his opponent was not targeting him. The law of light was much faster than the water traversing technique in terms of speed. Otherwise, it would not be one of the top laws. After the leader of the Law of Earth Guards was obliterated by the Sovereign of Light, it condensed again not long after, and continued to block the staircase entrance. Soon, Yi Chen arrived at the top of the stairs, and engaged in an intense battle with the Law of Earth Guard leader. After spending 5 breaths of time, Yi Chen successfully passed through, and arrived at the first underground floor. He did not see the Light Supreme, being on the first underground floor. Obviously, the Light Supreme being had already passed through this floor. With his strength, he could have done it in a short time. The first floor above ground was for the Law of Earth Guards, and the second floor below ground was for the Law of Fire Guards. The Law of Fire Guards were all made of fire, and their explosive power was extremely strong. Fortunately, Yi Chen's Law of Water just happened to restrain the Law of Fire, so it was easier to deal with the Law of Fire Guards than the Law of Earth Guards. The second underground floor was guarded by the Law of Water Guards. The Law of Water Guards were very hard to deal with. Sometimes, they would turn into a pool of water to ambush. Sometimes they would turn into a whirlpool to entangle the intruder. And sometimes they would break apart and condense into water arrows to shoot. Open! A flash of lightning flickered, and quickly surpassed everyone like a lightning blade. It's the Tiger Fong Supreme Being. Amazing. Probably only the 5 great supreme beings are stronger than him. Tiger Fang Supreme Being comprehended the law of thunder. Although the law of thunder isn't one of the top laws, it is undoubtedly a powerful law, much stronger than the fundamental laws. There were also many heaven-defying sovereigns and demigods on this floor, and everyone started discussing. The majority of heaven-defying sovereigns had similar foundations. For example, they were all demigods, mid-stage ninth order martial will, and heart force perfection realm. In comparison, Yi Chen's foundation was slightly weaker, and he had not reached the demigod realm yet. However, he had the firmament sword and the black tortoise saint armor, especially the firmament sword. After absorbing a law of wind fragment, the sword's power increased greatly, and it made up for the lack of cultivation. Other than Sky Saint artifacts, the true embodiment of a heaven-defying sovereign's strength was the power of the laws. There were strong and weak laws, and from high to low, they were classified as peak laws, powerful laws, and fundamental laws. Those who could comprehend peak laws were monsters among monsters, and there was nothing they couldn't do. As for those who could comprehend powerful laws, they were elites among monsters. Seriously speaking, Yi Chen might be a monster among monsters. Up until now, he had only cultivated for tens of thousands of years, while many heaven-defying sovereigns had cultivated for hundreds of thousands of years, or even millions of years. Half a day passed, and Yi Chen arrived at the third underground floor. The ones guarding the third underground floor were the Law of Wood Protectors. The Law of Wood Protectors were all rooted in the ground, and the branches on their bodies were extremely soft, like whips. When countless whips came, even Yi Chen would be exhausted. Other than that, the Law of Wood Protectors were extremely hard to kill. As long as the roots weren't completely destroyed, they would immediately recover. After spending a full 3 days, Yi Chen finally made it through. If the Law of Water Protectors were said to be hard to deal with, and the Law of Wood Protectors were said to be hard to kill, then the Law of Metal Protectors on the fourth underground floor were very ferocious, and their power was very concentrated. Fortunately, the heaven-defying sovereigns here all had divine power crystals in their bodies, which could quickly replenish their energy and allow them to fight for a long time. A week later, Yi Chen arrived at the fifth underground floor. This floor was much more difficult in comparison, because the ones guarding this place were the Law of Wind Protectors. The Law of Wind was one of the powerful laws, and it wasn't something that the fundamental laws could compare to. The Law of Wind Protectors moved very quickly, almost on par with Yi Chen. Their attacks were very sharp, comparable to the Law of Metal, and the difficulty of dealing with them was close to that of the Law of Water. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to train himself, Yi Chen would have already left. The fifth underground floor was guarded by the Law of Wind Protectors, but who knew what kind of freakish protectors would be on the sixth underground floor, or even the seventh underground floor. He wasn't the Tiger Fang Sovereign, nor was he the Light Sovereign. Even if there were any treasures down there, he wouldn't be able to snatch them. His only motivation was to increase his cultivation. The other heaven-defying sovereigns were all demigods, and it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to become an elementary demigod. At the very least, it would be very difficult to do so in a short period of time. Chapter 1441. After spending 3 months, Yi Chen passed through the fifth underground floor protected by the Law of Wind Guards. After spending a year, Yi Chen passed through the sixth underground floor protected by the Law of Poison Guards. After spending 5 years, Yi Chen passed through the seventh underground floor protected by the Law of Bones Guards. After reaching the eighth underground floor, Yi Chen was finally stuck. Although there were fewer law guards the further down he went, and it was usually a one-on-one battle, the law guards on the eighth underground floor were Law of Shadows guards. Even in a one-on-one battle, Yi Chen would find it difficult to defeat them. The Law of Shadows guards were shadows. This shadow could be illusory, and no attack would be able to hit it. It could also be solid and release sharp attacks. In order to defeat the Law of Shadows guards, one had to attack when the opponent was in a solid state. Otherwise, even if the attack was 10 times stronger, it would be useless. Facing the elusive Law of Shadows guards, Yi Chen did not dare to be careless. He was in his most cautious state at all times. The extreme pressure turned into extreme motivation. Coupled with the numerous God-Force crystals in his body, Yi Chen's cultivation finally broke through to the quasi-demigod level. His martial Yuan Shen became a quasi-gold Yuan Shen with a faint golden color. The moment he broke through, Yi Chen could clearly feel that his senses and reaction speed had greatly increased. The originally indistinct law of shadows guards were no longer as elusive as before. It was as if he could grasp their every move. Chi. A sword flower lit up in the void. Yi Chen's sword pierced through the throat of a law of shadows guard. How profound. As expected of a quasi-gold Yuan Shen. Yi Chen's eyes lit up. At this moment, not only had his battle prowess greatly increased, but his senses and reaction speed had also reached a limit. It was as if he had the ability to predict. The moment his opponent turned solid, he stabbed his sword at his opponent's vitals, killing him in one hit. If it was before, he would not have been able to find or grasp this opportunity. Chi. After becoming a quasi-demigod, the law of shadows guards were no longer a match for Yi Chen. Soon, Yi Chen passed through the 8th underground floor. Then the 9th floor, the 10th floor, the 11th floor, the 12th floor. Yi Chen was like a hot knife through butter, rushing to the 13th underground floor in one breath. The ones guarding the 13th underground floor were the Darkness Elemental Guards. The Darkness Elemental Guards were one of the top elemental guards, not something that powerful elemental guards could compare to. At this moment, there were more than 10 cosmic life forms trapped on this floor. There were heaven-defying sovereigns and mid-level demigods. These cosmic life forms were much stronger than the previous Yi Chen. Yi Chen guessed that these people must have arrived a long time ago, because he had never seen any of them before. The 13th underground floor was different from the previous floors. There were many stairways here, and in front of each stairway was a law of darkness guard. If one wanted to enter the next floor, they only needed to kill one of the law of darkness guards. Of course, although one only needed to kill one law of darkness guard, the difficulty was definitely 100, or even 1,000 times higher than the 12th underground floor. Without sufficient strength, one might be trapped here forever like these people. Not in a hurry, Yi Chen observed the battle between the law of darkness guard and these cosmic life forms for a while. Yi Chen discovered that the law of darkness guard had two extremely terrifying abilities. One was to transform into darkness, rendering attacks ineffective, just like the law of shadows guard. The other was to contain a suction force. Moves and techniques are already useless. Only absolute strength is the most reliable. Yi Chen frowned. The law of darkness guard was too powerful. If he wanted to defeat it, his attack had to reach a certain level, just like light supremacy or thunder tusk supremacy. Billowing sword. Yi Chen used a killing move right off the bat. A surging wave of sword light blasted toward the law of darkness guard. Hua! The law of darkness guard instantly transformed into darkness. The surging wave of sword light entered the darkness and disappeared without a sound. The next moment, darkness condensed, and the law of darkness guard grabbed at Yi Chen. Its palm contained an extremely powerful suction force, as if the universe was about to be destroyed and enter the Great Dark Age. I don't believe you can withstand many billowing sword attacks. Yi Chen used the billowing sword again and again. The law of wind in the firmament sword increased his sword speed, and his attack frequency more than doubled. 1 week, 1 month, 1 year. Gradually, Yi Chen discovered that the law of darkness guard's strength was weakening. 5 years had passed, and the law of darkness guard finally shattered, unable to condense again. He turned his head to look at the others. A few cosmic life forms had disappeared, and a few new faces had appeared. They were probably the same as him, and had made it through. Of course, they might have died in the hands of the law of darkness guard. 14th underground floor. The law of light guard. The law of light guard's strength was much higher than the law of darkness guard's. Not only could it transform into light, but its movement and attack speed were also quite fast. It was a great threat. Here, Yi Chen saw Supremacy Thundertusk. In addition, he also saw 7 other cosmic life forms, 3 heaven-defying supremes, and 4 mid-level demigods. Supremacy Thundertusk was indeed in existence second only to the 5 supremes. His attack power was very terrifying. Yi Chen estimated that he might not be afraid of Supremacy Thundertusk, but he was definitely not a match for Supremacy Thundertusk. After all, there was a natural gap. Thundertusk comprehended the law of thunder, while Yi Chen comprehended the law of water. Apart from Supremacy Thundertusk, the other three heaven-defying supremes could not be underestimated. They all comprehended powerful laws, namely the law of wind, the law of ice, and the law of blood. As for the four mid-level demigods, they were even more terrifying. Their foundations were too deep, and they were not afraid of the law of light guard's attack at all. Yi Chen did not see Supremacy Thundertusk, and he guessed that he must have made it through this floor. After all, the strength of the five supremes was publicly acknowledged. Only by facing the top laws would one know how powerful they were. Haha, everyone, I'll make a move first. Supremacy Thundertusk slashed open the law of light guard's body, stepped into the stairway, and disappeared. Damn it, the next floor will definitely have god blood and law fragments. Die. The remaining cosmic life forms were all anxious, especially the four mid-level demigods. Being able to reach this step, they were all experts among the mid-level demigods. The five supremes might be stronger than them, but it would be extremely difficult to kill them. If they could get their hands on the god blood, their strength would undergo a qualitative change. They might even become powerful demigods in an instant and comprehend laws. The martial primordial spirit of a mid-level demigod was a gold primordial spirit, and it had reached the mid-level gold stage. Once it went berserk, there would be turbulent energy waves everywhere. Finally, a mid-level demigod passed this floor and also entered the stairway. I can only take it one step at a time. Yi Chen chuckled bitterly. He had made multiple breakthroughs, and his power had improved by leaps and bounds. But there would always be someone more powerful than him. It would not be easy to get a share from so many powerful warriors. Of course, it was also impossible for Yi Chen to back off. After all, he had already come this far. Fortunately, his cultivation had reached the quasi-demigod level, and he had some ability to protect himself when facing a terrifying existence like Supremacy Thundertusk. Chapter 1442. It took Yi Chen 10 years to defeat the Law of Light Protector. At this moment, the number of people on the 14th underground floor had increased to 10. There were 5 heaven-defying supremes and 5 mid-level demigods. Whoosh! With a flash, Yi Chen entered the stairway and headed to the next floor. 15 floors underground. A ball of blood floated in the air, slowly spinning and wriggling, emitting a supreme aura. Before this aura, Yi Chen felt as if his breathing had stopped. From the outside to the inside, from his body to his soul, there wasn't a single part of him that wasn't suppressed. The entire 15th floor seemed to have turned into a world of mercury, incomparably heavy. Divine blood. Yi Chen's eyes flashed. The blood of a true god was extremely precious, and there were only 2 ways to obtain it. First, the true god would voluntarily, or be forced to separate the god's blood. Second, when a true god died, the god's blood would scatter everywhere. If one could refine a drop of god's blood, the effect would definitely be greater than 100,000, or even 1 million divine power crystals. If the god's blood made Yi Chen extremely excited, then the nomological fragments around the god's blood also made Yi Chen extremely tempted. There were 15 law fragments around the god's blood. They were metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, poison, white bone, shadow, darkness, and light. The law of metal fragment was a metal ball the size of a longan. It emitted a faint golden light. The golden light was not dazzling, but it gave off an extremely sharp feeling. It was as if being illuminated by the golden light would immediately blind one's eyes. The fragment of the law of wood was a thumb-sized seed. The seed was emerald green and brimmed with endless vitality. The space around the seed was affected by this vitality. Hundreds of flowers bloomed and vegetation grew. The law of water fragment was the size of a fist, and it was a ball of water. Looking at the ball of water, Yi Chen felt as if he had arrived at a boundless sea of chaos. The waves surged violently, and the waves covered the sky, causing one to feel insignificant. The law of fire fragment was a cluster of flames. The fragment of the law of earth was an irregular piece of yellow soil, thick and boundless. The wind law fragment was a powerful hurricane, more than 10 times larger than the one absorbed by the firmament sword. The law of poison fragment was a drop of purplish-black poison. The white bone law fragment was a piece of white bone that seemed to have grown out of the void. The fragment of the law of shadow was faintly discernible. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be able to see it. The law of thunder fragment was a lightning mark. From time to time, it would release lightning and thunder, rumbling and flashing. The law of darkness fragment was pure darkness, a darkness that devoured everything. The light law fragment was a dazzling light that repelled all impurities. It wasn't as deep as the darkness, but it was more tyrannical and pure. At the moment, 5 people had arrived on the 15th underground floor. They were 3 heaven-defying supremes and 2 mid-level demigods. The 3 heaven-defying supremes were Supreme Radiant, Supreme Thunder Fong, and a Supreme covered in white bones. Of the 2 mid-level demigods, one was short and had goat horns, and the other was a 3-headed, 6-armed ancient life form of the universe. Supremacy Light was absorbing the law of light fragments. Supremacy Thunderfang was absorbing the law of thunder fragments, and the other Supremacy Heaven Defying was absorbing the law of white bone fragments. Based on their speed, it would take them at least 1,000 years to completely absorb the law of light fragments. After all, the law of light fragments here were simply too big. As for the 2 mid-level demigods, they were absorbing the god's blood. They could only absorb a bit of God's blood at a time, and this bit of God's blood was just a drop in the ocean compared to the total amount of God's blood. Yi Chen's arrival did not cause any commotion. The 5 of them did not even look at Yi Chen. There was no need to engage in a meaningless fight. Law of Water Fragment. Yi Chen stared at the fist-sized Law of Water Fragment. This Law of Water Fragment was too big. It was dozens of times bigger than the one Yi Chen had absorbed before. It was sparkling and translucent, emitting a lustrous glow. After absorbing this fragment of the Law of Water, my Law of Water will increase by at least 10 times. Dozens of times the power of the water rule. This was not a dozen times increase in battle prowess, but tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of times. His battle prowess would probably soar directly to the level of a high-level demigod. Of course, whether he could completely absorb it was another matter. No one knew how much power of the law a heaven-defying supreme could have. Floating up, Yi Chen slowly approached the fragment of the Law of Water. Splash! The Law of Water sensed Yi Chen's approach, and a wave of water rippled over, enveloping Yi Chen. Yi Chen realized that after his cultivation broke through to the quasi-demigod level, the power of the Law of Water had doubled. It was much easier for him to absorb the Law of Water fragment, and it did not cause much repulsion or resistance. Bit by bit, Yi Chen slowly absorbed the power of the Law of Water fragment. 20 years passed. 50 years passed. During this period, Honorable Light opened his eyes once and frowned. He had been here for more than 100 years, but the power of the Law of Light he absorbed was very little. As time passed, the power of the Law of Light he could absorb was also decreasing. 100 years passed. Honorable Light stopped absorbing the power of the Law of Light. He could no longer absorb the power of the Law of Light. His martial yuan spirit had reached its limit. If it was not for the divine force crystal in his body, he would not be able to fight for a long time. Otherwise, his martial yuan spirit would collapse, and he would die from the power of the Law of Light. Since I can't absorb the power of the Law of Light, I'll absorb the God's blood first. To Honorable Light, the God's blood was also very important. He might be able to use the God's blood to become an elementary demigod. Once he became an elementary demigod, his strength would definitely be among the powerful demigods, or even stronger. Who is it? Seeing that someone came to absorb the God's blood, the 2 mid-level demigods quickly looked over. Me? Why would I have an opinion? Honorable Light glanced at the 2 of them. These 2 mid-level demigods were definitely powerful mid-level demigods. After absorbing so much God's blood, they should have gained a lot of benefits. So it's Honorable Light. The 2 of them did not dare to offend Honorable Light, so they closed their eyes again. On the 150th and 180th years, the skeleton-covered Honorable against Heaven and Honorable Thunder Tooth stopped absorbing the power of the Law of Light, and started absorbing the god's blood. The two mid-level demigods did not say anything as they felt that the two of them were not to be trifled with. On the 200th year, on the 300th year, on the 500th year, what surprised the five was that Yi Chun had been absorbing the power of the law of light. His soul and martial yuan spirit seemed to have no limit. Could it be that his absorption is very slow? No, the fragment of the law of light has shrunk quite a bit, but his absorption speed is not slow at all. Even Yi Chun himself could not understand why he could continue absorbing. One must know that when he first started to comprehend the power of the law of light, he had also suffered from the backlash of the power of the law of light, and he did not dare to use it too much. On the 700th year, Yi Chun finally could not continue absorbing the power of the law of light. His soul and martial yuan spirit had reached a saturation state, and could no longer withstand the more powerful power of the law of light. Naturally, Yi Chun turned his gaze to the god's blood. Chapter 1443. The amount of God's blood was sufficient. The five of them had not finished absorbing it even after such a long time. There was still more than half left. God's blood contains the essence of a true God's God power. Whether or not I can become a primary demigod in the primal chaos battlefield depends on it. Yi Chun was very clear that there would be more experts in the primal chaos battlefield in the later stages. This was because the vast primal chaos battlefield could not only have one god's relic. There would definitely be other gods' relics or opportunities. If you did not improve, others would. Don't think that the five supremes were very powerful. As long as one of them became a primary demigod, the five supremes would have to step aside. Of course, it was also possible for the five supremes to become primary demigods. At that time, no one would be able to defeat them. Yi Chun did not wish to die in the primal chaos battlefield and become someone else's stepping stone. Therefore, he had to seize every opportunity to strengthen himself. As long as he was the strongest, the primal chaos battlefield would be like his backyard. Only he could kill others, and no one would be able to kill him. In this way, it would be much easier to find Su Jing and Morong Qingcheng. The legendary heaven realm should be filled with dangers. It is imperative to become a primary demigod. Besides the primal chaos battlefield, the legendary heaven realm also made Yi Chun feel a bit of pressure. It was not wrong to work hard to improve his strength. Seeing Yi Chun looking at the god's blood, the two mid-level demigods were a bit anxious. They were mid-level demigods. The amount of God's blood they needed to become advanced demigods was far more than what the Supremes needed to become primary demigods. However, these Supremes were not ordinary people. The speed at which they absorbed the God's blood was very fast. It was almost 1% of what they needed. Don't think that 1% was a lot. In fact, if converted into years, it might be hundreds of thousands or even millions of years. With one more Yi Chun, they would have to cultivate for hundreds of thousands or millions of years. Honorable light, the amount of God's blood is limited. If you Supremes want to become primary demigods, it will be much harder than ordinary demigods to become primary demigods. A mid-level demigod transmitted his voice to Honorable Light. Supremacy of Light sneered. You want to kill me with a borrowed knife? Yi Chun had been absorbing water law fragments for a total of 700 years. No one present dared to say that they could kill Yi Chun. Even the Light Overlord did not have the confidence to do so. Although the water law was a fundamental law, the more one comprehended it, the more terrifying it would be. His light law was inferior to Yi Chun's water law in terms of realm. You've misunderstood. We just want to cooperate with you and get rid of this brat first. Then we'll get rid of Tiger Fong's sovereign and Bone Devil's sovereign. Another mid-level demigod explained. Oh, the Exalt of Light's expression did not change as he sent a voice transmission. The two of you are mid-level demigods and have absorbed much more god blood than us exalted heaven-defying exalts. Why don't I choose to work with the three of them to deal with the two of you? Haha, Honorable Radiant. Even though you are one of the five honorables, it would still be difficult for you to kill a mid-level demigod, let alone me and battle Sage Liaotian. That's right. We mid-level demigods have rich sources. Our foundation is more than 10,000 times that of you exalted heaven-defying exalts. If you want to kill us, You have to be many times stronger than us. Of these two mid-level demigods, one was the ancient hoof battle sage from the Earth-piercer cosmos, and the other was the ancient multiverses battle sage Liaotian. Both of them were experts among mid-level demigods. In a one-on-one situation, they were indeed inferior to the Exalt of Light, and perhaps even Tiger Fong Sovereign. However, it was almost impossible for the two of them to kill them. Even if they stood still and did not put up any defense, it would still take a long time for them to be killed. This was the terror of mid-level demigods. You guys are very confident. However, what you said makes sense. Thinking about how difficult it was to kill mid-level demigods, the Exalt of Light frowned. Several thousand years ago, he had chased after an ordinary mid-level demigod. His strength was many times stronger than his opponent, but he still failed to kill him after several years. Perhaps he could have killed him if he had spent a little more time. But he was impatient. It was too much of a waste of time. Killing a mid-level demigod was not worth it. The ancient Hoof Battle Sage and Liaotian Battle Sage before him were not ordinary mid-level demigods. The difficulty of killing them was more than 10,000 times higher. However, this person has absorbed the law of water fragment for 700 years. I wonder what level his strength has reached. Thinking of Yi Chun, the Exalt of Light felt some regret. If he had known that Yi Chun had such amazing potential, he would have killed Yi Chun long ago. At that time, killing Yi Chun would not require much effort. Exalt of Light, what are you afraid of? Even if we can't kill him, he can't do anything to us. We won't know until we try. All right. The Exalt of Light agreed. Just as the ancient Hoof Battle Sage had said, he might not be able to do anything to Yi Chun, but Yi Chun would not be able to do anything to him either. The power of the Law of Light was not only reflected in combat strength. In addition to communicating with the Exalt of Light, the ancient Hoof Battle Sage and Liaotian Battle Sage had also informed the Tiger Fong supremacy and the Bone Demon supremacy. The Bone Demon supremacy had agreed, but the Tiger Fong supremacy had not. After this person is dead, it might be my turn. The Tiger Fong supremacy sneered in his heart. He planned to help Yi Chun when he could no longer hold on. Not for others, but for himself. Yi Chun did not seem to notice the forced strangeness. He rapidly approached the god blood, ready to take a share. Brat, get lost. At this time, the ancient Hoof Battle Sage, Liaotian Battle Sage, the Exalt of Light, and the Bone Demon supremacy launched a joint attack at Yi Chun. The ancient Hoof Battle Sage sent out countless hoof prints, each one seemingly engraved in the void. The Exalt of Light's 6 arms, each slashed out a flaming saber light. The Exalt of Light's attack was the most magnificent, like a sun, shooting countless rays of light at Yi Chun. The Bone Demon supremacy put his hands together and separated, shooting countless bone spears at Yi Chun. In the current Primal Chaos battlefield, the 4 were undoubtedly the top and most terrifying characters. If the 4 of them joined forces to attack one person, then that person would die without a doubt. Facing this desperate situation, Yi Chun's eyes were solemn, but also excited. After absorbing the Law of Water fragment for 700 years, he did not know what level his strength had reached. This was the perfect opportunity. However, he did not dare to be careless. Once he could no longer hold on, he would immediately leave and give up on the god blood. It's not certain who will get lost. With a roar, Yi Chun turned into a waterman. Shortly after, the waterman stirred up monstrous waves that swept in all directions, submerging more than half of the 15th floor. The rumbling waves caused the 15th floor to slightly tremble, as if a peerless beast was about to awaken. As soon as the ancient Hoof Battle Sage's hoof prints fell into the water, their speed sharply decreased, and they lost more than half of their power. Liaotian Battle Sage's flaming saber light gradually extinguished, emitting a faint glow. The Bone Demon supremacy's bone spear was very sharp, piercing through 90% of the waves and almost hitting Yi Chun. As for the Exalt of Light's light ray, it was the most terrifying, almost piercing through the waves in an instant. However, it was ultimately blocked by Yi Chun's firmament sword. What? The 4 were shocked. This was their strongest attack, but it could not do anything to Yi Chun. The blood of a true god was a treasure of heaven and earth. It contained the purest divine power. Unfortunately, other than powerful demigods, no one could directly convert the ownerless divine power into their own divine power. Most people below the level of a powerful demigod could only use the ownerless divine power to increase their own cultivation. They could not convert it directly, and there would definitely be a lot of waste in the process. After continuously absorbing the god blood, Yichen gradually understood the profoundness of divine power. This kind of power was definitely the ultimate power, the most violent power. However, the power of laws was different. It was the power of rules, the way to use power. It was like a technique that could increase the power of one's power by many times. So that's how it is. One of the requirements to condense divine power is to have the light of the soul. Above the heart sword realm was the sword of the soul, which was also the light of the soul. Only the light of the soul could control all kinds of power and condense divine power. Otherwise, divine power would easily collapse and be unable to be preserved. After understanding a part of the profoundness of divine power, Yichen's horizons had been broadened. A part of the obstacles to cultivation also seemed to have disappeared. Crackle. In the process of absorbing the god blood, Yichen's spirit body continued to improve, from mid-rank 9 to late rank 9. His strength increased greatly, and his body seemed to have endless power. This was different from Sword Yuan. The two were different kinds of power, and they would both become a part of divine power in the future, and have their own uses. Other than that, Yichen's Green Lotus Sword domain realm was also slowly improving, from early rank 9 to mid-rank 9. In fact, the reason why Yichen improved so quickly was because his foundation was weak, and he hadn't reached a very high realm. On the other hand, the Light Supremacy and the others had already reached a very high realm in all aspects, so they couldn't improve much in a short period of time. The only improvement they could make was a breakthrough in their cultivation and becoming a low-ranked demigod. Pop. Finally, Yichen's Green Lotus Sword domain broke through from early rank 9 to mid-rank 9, and his strength improved again. Of course, Yichen also knew that although the Green Lotus Sword domain had improved by a level, it wasn't very useful. At the current stage, his opponents were all terrifying people, and the mid-rank 9 sword domain could only cancel out the opponent's domain. At most, it could suppress it slightly, but it wouldn't have much of an impact. The key was still to rely on absolute strength. However, if the Green Lotus Sword domain could break through to late rank 9, he would be able to easily suppress others. He had to take it step by step. In the blink of an eye, 1,000 years had passed, and there was still 60 to 70% of the god blood left. During this period, a dozen people had made it from the 14th underground floor to the 15th underground floor. Unfortunately, they were very unlucky, and they were killed by Yichen's group of 6 before they could even absorb the fragments of the laws. They didn't want to let others have a share, and they didn't want to raise a tiger that would bring them trouble. After all, once one absorbed a large amount of the laws, it would be very hard to kill them. Yichen was a living example. Another 1,000 years had passed, and there was still half of the god blood left. Haha, how can I miss out on absorbing the god blood? On this day, a figure came from the 14th underground floor to the 15th floor. It was a heaven-defying supreme filled with endless death aura, and his eyes were emitting a frightening light. The Dead Supreme. The Light Supremacy revealed a look of fear. The Dead Supreme was one of the 5 supremacies, and what he comprehended was the Death Law, which was one of the top laws like the Light Law. Moreover, from the looks of it, he should have obtained a lot of benefits in other places. The Death Aura was extremely dense, and his realm was no lower than the Light Supreme. Let's deal with him together. The Light Supremacy suddenly said. All right. Everyone, including Yichen, agreed one after another. Kill. The 6 of them unleashed a powerful attack, blasting at the Dead Supreme. Hee, you want to kill me? In your next life. I comprehended the Death Law, and I'm already in a state of death. How can you kill me? The Dead Supreme did not care about the attack that was blasting at him, and he took it head-on. In this way, the Dead Supreme also joined the ranks of absorbing the god blood, and the number of people became 7 from 6. On the 4,000 years, only 40% of the god blood was left, and the battle broke out again. This time, it was Yi Chen's group of 5 against the Ancient Hoof Battle Sage and the Burning Sky Battle Sage. The main reason was that the two absorbed the god blood too quickly. The 5 decided to spend some time to kill the two, even if it took them 1 or 2,000 years. Chapter 1445. Do you really think we're pushovers that you can bully? Humph. Since you want to expel us, then don't even think about absorbing the divine blood. The two were fearless. They had absorbed most of the divine blood, and their cultivation had improved rapidly. Their gold primordial spirits had reached the peak of mid-stage, which was many times stronger than before. Kill. Supremacy of Light was the first to attack the two. Countless rays of light shot out. PFFF, PFFF. The two retreated with difficulty, blood dripping from the corners of their mouths. Supremacy of Light's attacks were very domineering. Each ray of light was extraordinarily powerful. They had no way to fight back. The Sovereign of the Dead's attack was much more bizarre. He rubbed his hands together, and thousands of poisonous snakes made of black mist pounced at the Greenhoof Battle Sage and Scorching Sky Battle Sage, leaving shallow marks on their bodies. These shallow marks were like living creatures, slowly wriggling and absorbing the vitality and aura of the two. Of course, mid-level demigods were mid-level demigods. With a flash of light, all the shallow marks disappeared as if they had never existed. The Sovereign of the Dead was not surprised by this. The Ancient Hoof War Sage and the Burning Sky War Sage were peak mid-level demigods. Other than high-level demigods, no one could easily kill them. It would take a long time to kill them. Whoosh. If Supremacy of Light's attacks were domineering and Supremacy of the Dead strange, then Yi Chen's attacks were mighty and endless. In terms of offensive power, even Light Supreme was inferior to Yi Chen. In the void, the blue sword light converged to form an ocean wave that battered Ancient Hoof Battle Saint and Burning Sky Battle Saint, forcing them to retreat without a trace of power to counterattack. As for Tiger Fong and Bone Devil, they were much weaker than the three, but they could more or less exhaust the Ancient Hoof War Saint and Scorching Sky War Saint's origin energy. Their usefulness was not to be underestimated. After 100 years, the Ancient Hoof War Saint and Scorching Sky War Saint's auras had weakened significantly. Damn it. After 100 years of beating, the Ancient Hoof Battle Saint's eyes were almost spewing fire. I'll let you be arrogant for now. Let's see how long you can keep attacking, Scorching Sky Battle Saint said fiercely. After 1,000 years, the two's auras had weakened by more than 30%. It's actually so hard to kill. Even though they had mentally prepared themselves, Yi Chen and the others were still shocked. Originally, they had estimated that they would be able to kill the two of them in 1,000 years. Unexpectedly, the two of them had only weakened by 30%. Although the two of them would become weaker as time passed, it would definitely take more than 2,000 years to completely kill them. What surprised Yi Chen and the others even more was that in the next 500 years, the auras of the two war saints did not decline. Instead, they grew stronger and recovered to 80% of their original strength. As it turned out, although the two of them had been in a state of constant beatings, it had also played a role in tempering themselves. The divine blood they had absorbed earlier had quickly turned into nutrients to replenish their bodies. This won't do. If this continues, they might not die. Instead, we will be exhausted to death. The Exalt of Light frowned. That's right. They're using us to transform the power in the god's blood, Yi Chen said as he exhaled. Why don't we take turns to attack them, and the rest will absorb the god's blood? The Venerable of the Dead suggested. How should we distribute it? Bone Devil Supreme's eyes flashed. It's very simple. 3 people attack, and 2 people absorb the god's blood. We'll rotate once every 100 years. In the 100th year, Yi Chen, the Venerable of the Dead, and the Venerable of the Dead attacked the War Saints, while the Venerable of Light and the Venerable of Tiger Fong absorbed the god's blood. Seeing this situation, the War Saints and the Venerable of the Dead's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Previously, they were still in the mood to waste time with Yi Chen and the others, but now they had completely lost the mood. After a long time, the remaining god's blood would definitely be absorbed, and there would be no share for them. They still wanted to rely on the god's blood to advance to high-level demigods. Damn it, die for me. The war saints of the dead, and the venerable of the dead, erupted with their strongest combat strength. Before this, they were only ordinary combat strength. Unfortunately, Yi Chun and the venerable of the dead were not to be trifled with. They easily suppressed the two, and no matter how much they roared, they could do nothing. After 100 years, it was the venerable of light, the venerable of the dead, and Yi Chun attacking the two, while the venerable of the dead and the venerable of the dead absorbed the god's blood. Because only two people could absorb the god's blood at a time, it was still not Yi Chun's turn this time. But it didn't matter. He would be compensated later, and no one was willing to suffer a loss. Soon 1,000 years passed. The god's blood shrank slightly, but there was not much change. The five were, after all, heaven-defying supremes. Their efficiency of absorbing the god's blood was far lower than that of mid-level demigods, especially when three of them had to deal with the war saints. Too slow. Altogether, 6,000 or 7,000 years had passed. Yi Chun felt that the efficiency of absorbing the god's blood was too slow. At this rate, it would take at least tens of thousands of years. The higher the cultivation, the faster the absorption. It has little to do with strength. The two of them turned into a ray of light and a wisp of black mist, quickly escaping. The 15th underground level was very large. Every inch of space had been transformed by the divine blood. It was like a small universe. Trying to escape, the Green Hoof War Saint didn't do anything, but his location began to shake. A moment later, space twisted as he appeared behind the radiant autarch and punched. Just as the deep hoof print was about to engrave itself onto the Radiant Supremacy's body, the Radiant Supremacy abruptly transformed into a golden sun, turning from a corporeal body into an incorporeal body. Puff! The hoof print pierced through the golden sun, causing it to shatter. It then reformed into the body of the Sovereign of Light. However, his face was extremely pale. Relying on the law of light, he had withstood the attack of the Green Hoof Battle Saint, but a high-grade demigod was too powerful. Even in his incorporeal form, he was still heavily injured. It was easy to imagine that once he returned to his physical form, he would undoubtedly die. How enviable! The law of light is even greater than I imagined. The ancient Hoof War Saint was indignant. He hated all heaven-defying supremes for being able to comprehend laws in advance. This was too unfair. Swordsman Azure Lotus, the situation isn't looking good. Tiger Fong and Yi Chun had already noticed the changes in the Green Hoof War Saint. Tiger Fong said in a low voice, "You find the exit first. Take the chance to kill the Radiant Supremacy and the Dead Supremacy," Yi Chun said. "What about you?" Tiger Fong looked at Yi Chun. "I plan to give it a try." Yi Chun felt that the three Supreme Sword Intents were showing signs of a breakthrough. After coming to the Primal Chaos battlefield, the three Supreme Sword Intents had already broken through once, from early stage to mid-stage 9th rank. This greatly increased his strength. He originally thought that it would be impossible for him to continue breaking through in the Primal Chaos battlefield. Even if he wanted to break through, he would probably have to wait until he became an elementary demigod. However, after absorbing 9,000 years of divine blood, the three Supreme Sword Intents had the possibility of breaking through again. Of course, this was mainly because the three Supreme Sword Intents existed in Yi Chun's Soul Sea at the same time, creating a resonance effect. If there was only one Supreme Sword Intent, it would be impossible for him to break through so quickly. Give it a try. Alright, I'll take my leave first. Sensing that Yi Chun wasn't joking, Tiger Fong nodded and quickly left. I don't think I can escape even if I try to escape now. I might as well give it a try. If there was an exit, Yi Chun would not hesitate to escape from it. Unfortunately, the exit to the 15th floor had not been found yet. Wasting time searching for an exit was unacceptable to Yi Chun. Floating near the god's blood, Yi Chun closed his eyes and continued to absorb the god's blood. Run! Why aren't you running anymore? Puff! Poo-pew! Poo-pew-pew-pew-pew-pew. The ancient Hoof War Saint laughed maniacally as he pierced through the golden sun and black mist again and again. The laws of light and death were indeed powerful. In terms of power, the ancient Hoof War Saint was at least 10,000 times stronger than the Radiant Sovereign and King Sovereign. Alas, he still couldn't kill the two in a short time. He could only heavily injure them and wear down their martial nascent spirits. Ancient Hoof War Saint, why are you so ruthless? If you can spare me, I'm willing to become your servant. The Sovereign of the Dead said humbly. Comprehending the law of death made him cherish his life even more and would not easily give up. Servant? Sorry, I don't need it. I just want to see you die. The ancient Hoof War Saint grinned and continued to attack. Again and again. No! The golden sun burst into millions of rays, and the roar of the Radiant Sovereign could be heard. Unfortunately, the rays could no longer condense and gradually disappeared into the void. One of the 5 sovereigns, the Radiant Sovereign, had fallen. The Sovereign of the Dead's heart tightened, and he frantically fled. In terms of survivability, the law of death was much stronger than the law of light, but the difference in strength was too great. The Sovereign of the Dead still could not escape death. The black mist dissipated and a black seed fell. Crack. The ancient Hoof War Saint shattered the black seed. The law of death was strange and unpredictable, so he did not think that the Sovereign of the Dead was completely dead. Sure enough, the moment the black seed shattered, the Sovereign of the Dead screamed and stopped abruptly. After killing the Radiant Sovereign and the Sovereign of the Dead, the ancient Hoof War Saint began to chase after Tiger Fong. A year later, Supreme Tiger Fong fell. In the end, it was Yi Chun, who did not take any action, who survived. You're very lucky that you didn't take any action. That's why I left you for last. The ancient Hoof War Saint walked towards Yi Chun step by step, each step causing the void to tremble. Chapter 1447. Next to the Divine Blood. Yi Chun opened his eyes and turned to look at the Green Hoof War Saint. With the fall of the Radiant Sovereign and the Dead Sovereign, Yi Chun knew that the Green Hoof War Saint was no longer the same as before. He now had the ability to kill the 5 sovereigns. This was something that no mid-level demigod could do. Green Hoof War Saint, I didn't think that the Radiant Sovereign and the Dead Sovereign would die in your hands. They must be very unwilling, Yi Chun said. The Green Hoof War Saint grinned. They were indeed unwilling, but they brought this upon themselves. However, they were also very lucky to be killed by a high-ranked demigod, outside of the legendary celestial realm. I'm afraid no one has ever seen a high-ranked demigod. Indeed, this is the first time I've seen one. Yi Chun nodded. In his eyes, the Green Hoof War Saint was millions of times more dazzling than the sun. This was the sign of a gold primordial spirit reaching its peak. How about it? Do you still need me to do it? The Green Hoof War Saint looked at Yi Chun mockingly. After becoming a high-ranked demigod, he would be able to absorb the divine blood even faster. In a few years, he would be able to absorb the rest. But before that, he had to deal with Yi Chun. As for how, he had not decided yet. He would do it in a way that was more interesting. Do it. Yi Chun unsheathed the firmament sword. Die. The Green Hoof War Saint suddenly punched at Yi Chun. Clang. Sparks flew everywhere. Yi Chun's face turned pale as he was sent flying. The Green Hoof War Saint was a little surprised. He had only used 10 to 20% of his power, but if it was the Radiant Sovereign or the Dead Sovereign, they would definitely be gravely injured. Why did his opponent only turn pale? Something was wrong. Again, the Green Hoof War Saint once again punched at Yi Chun. This time, he used 30 to 40% of his power. Puffed. Spurting out a mouthful of blood, Yi Chun continued to fly. Again. The Green Hoof War Saint used 100% of his power in this last punch. Pop. An invisible force was transmitted into Yi Chun's body, causing Yi Chun's body to tremble. In the next moment, he opened his mouth and spat out a large amount of blood. Cracks also appeared on his body. Impossible. Supremacy of light and supremacy of death were able to resist for so long because of their incorporeal forms. They received very little damage each time, only 1,000th, or even 10,000th of their actual damage. If Yi Chun used the law of water to turn incorporeal, he could accept it, but Yi Chun didn't use this ability at all. How did you do it? The ancient Hoof War Saint stared at Yi Chun. Yi Chen heaved a sigh of relief and smiled faintly. Thank you for giving me enough time. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to raise my sword intent to the late stage of the 9th rank. Indeed, Yi Chen's 3 supreme sword intents had broken through to the late stage of the 9th rank. The higher one's sword intent was, the harder it was to improve. This was especially true for supreme sword intents. Once they broke through, their combat prowess would increase greatly. One had to know that at the late stage of the 9th rank, one was only one level away from the peak of the 9th rank, which was the limit of sword intent. Of course, a heaven-defying sovereign was still a heaven-defying sovereign. If it was any of the 5 sovereigns who had reached the late stage of the 9th rank, they still wouldn't be a match for the Green Hoof War Saint. However, among Yi Chen's 3 supreme sword intents was the Immortal sword intent. It was called Immortal, and had an indestructible attribute. Apart from that, he also had the Black Tortoise sacred armor, and the Immortal sword physique. With the continuous improvement of the Immortal sword intent, Yi Chen's Immortal sword physique reached the 17th level, allowing him to contend against an elementary demigod's attack. A late-stage 9th rank supreme sword intent? The Green Hoof War Saint narrowed his eyes. He didn't comprehend a supreme martial intent, but a lower grade one. Even so, he still couldn't break through to the late stage of the 9th rank, and was stuck at the peak of the mid-stage of the 9th rank. Yi Chen, a mere heaven-defying sovereign, had actually reached the late stage of the 9th rank. The Green Hoof War Saint didn't know whether he should admire or be jealous of Yi Chen. Even if you can hold on for a while, I don't believe you can hold on for 100 or even 1,000 years. The more stunning Yi Chen's performance was, the more the Green Hoof War Saint couldn't let Yi Chen live. Otherwise, once Yi Chen became an elementary demigod, no one would be able to stop him. Wisps of golden flames ignited on his body, and the aura of the Green Hoof War Saint increased by 1,000 times. A demigod secret art? Yi Chen was startled. Die! The Green Hoof War Saint punched at Yi Chen. This punch was incomprehensibly fast. Even time and space began to reverse, and Yi Chen's reaction time was stretched. PFFF. Unprepared, Yi Chen spurted out a large amount of blood. Countless cracks appeared on his body, and he was instantly gravely injured. Even a large portion of his martial Dao nascent spirit was obliterated. No matter how powerful the Immortal sword intent was, it couldn't perfectly defend against extreme combat power. He actually burned his gold martial Dao nascent spirit to obtain destructive power? Yi Chen didn't dare to be careless. He activated the law of water, and instantly turned into a water man. At the same time, ripples appeared around him, as if he was in a world of water. The next moment, the Green Hoof War Saint attacked again. The world of water was instantly pierced through, and the water man Yi Chen turned into was also destroyed. But soon, the water condensed and turned back into a water man. Turning incorporeal allowed Yi Chen to ignore the majority of the damage, just like the Radiant Sovereign and the Dead Sovereign. 1 year passed. 10 years passed. 100 years passed. The Green Hoof War Saint finally stopped burning his gold martial Dao nascent spirit. He glared angrily at Yi Chen. After becoming a high-ranked demigod, he could burn his gold martial Dao nascent spirit to increase his combat power. But it couldn't last long. He could only last for 100 years, thanks to the remaining god blood. Even so, the consumption was still great. On the other hand, Yi Chen didn't consume too much. The god blood in his body allowed him to last longer. Damn, if my martial intent can reach late-stage 9th order, I can definitely kill him, the Green Hoof War Saint thought. Sword Venerable Azure Lotus, I'll let you go for now. Hurry up and get out of the 15th floor. The Green Hoof War Saint turned and flew toward the god blood. Since he couldn't kill Yi Chen, he could only absorb the remaining god blood. Perhaps he could break through. Even if you want me to leave, I won't. Yi Chen also flew toward the god blood. You're courting death. The Green Hoof War Saint snorted. He didn't expect Yi Chen to be so daring to stay. Fine, once he broke through again, it would be the death of Yi Chen. Just like that, the Green Hoof War Saint and Yi Chen absorbed the god blood and minded their own business. Too slow. Seeing the rate at which the Green Hoof War Saint was absorbing the god blood, Yi Chen frowned. His absorption speed was only 1% of the Green Hoof War Saint's. which was too disadvantageous. I'll comprehend the power of laws first. Yi Chen gave up on absorbing the god blood. In any case, he hadn't used up all the god blood in his body and had stored it away. Metal gave birth to water, and water gave birth to wood. Yi Chen set his goal on the law of wood fragment. If he could comprehend the law of wood and the law of water and wood, his strength would reach a new peak. Chapter 1448. The wood law fragment was a thumb-sized seed. The seed was emerald green and brimming with endless vitality. The space around the seed was affected by this vitality, causing hundreds of flowers to blossom and vegetation to grow. When he was still some distance away from the wood law fragment, a dense forest blocked Yi Chen's path. The vines in the forest grew rapidly, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. Whoosh! The world of water rippled, protecting Yi Chen. Meanwhile, Yi Chen used the world of water as a medium to sense the wood law fragment's existence. Metal gave birth to water, and water gave birth to wood. When the law of water came into contact with the wood law, it suffered much less resistance. Pushing aside the vines, Yi Chen gradually approached the wood law fragment. When he was only 10 meters away from the wood law fragment, a green radiance suddenly appeared. No matter how hard Yi Chen pushed the law of water, he couldn't advance an inch. Realizing that he couldn't get any closer, Yi Chen stopped and gently pressed his right hand on the green radiance. This was the manifestation of the wood law. With the protection of the world of water, he could safely touch it. The wood law was full of vitality. Vitality could save people and kill people. For example, a heavily injured person on the verge of death could be instantly healed by injecting the law of wood. However, if a seed was planted in a healthy person, once the seed grew, it could kill the healthy person. The law of wood contained life and death. Of course, it only contained a part of life and death. The true life and death were the law of life and the law of death. Want to comprehend a second law? The green-hoof battle saint looked over with a cold glint in his eyes. If Yi Chen comprehended a second law, it would be difficult to deal with him. Whether it was a peak law, a powerful law, or a foundational law, each law had its own unique aspect and couldn't be underestimated. Even the green-hoof battle saint wasn't sure how much of a boost the two laws would have to one's combat prowess. A heaven-defying sovereign comprehending a second law is 10 times harder than comprehending a first law. I don't believe you can do it. Taking a deep breath, the green-hoof battle saint closed his eyes and didn't look at Yi Chen. Right now, the most pressing matter at hand was to absorb all the god blood and strive for another breakthrough. Once his martial will broke through to the late 9th order, his strength would increase tremendously. At that time, regardless of whether Yi Chen comprehended the second type of law or not, it would have no effect on him. Comprehending the law of wood was smoother than Yi Chen had imagined. Perhaps it was because he had comprehended the law of water and had reached a very high level in the law of water. In Yi Chen's perception, he seemed to see countless green dots of light. These green dots of light were very gentle, like little fairies dancing in the air. One day, the green spots gathered together, increasing in number until they finally formed a green seed. The seed fell to the ground and sprouted, growing into a small tree. The small tree was weathered by the wind and rain, and it gradually grew into a towering tree. Its branches were luxuriant, and it was overflowing with green. Day after day, year after year, with the towering tree as the center and the roots of the towering tree as the link, new trees began to grow. Grass and flowers sprouted around the small tree, and the soil became abnormally fertile. As the wind blew, the seeds on the tree scattered everywhere, landing on the surrounding soil. Finally, a jungle was born. The jungle grew larger and larger, turning into a forest. The forest expanded with water, insects, and animals. Unknowingly, the forest changed the surrounding world, making the air fresher and the soil more fertile. Everywhere was brimming with vitality, cheerfulness, and relaxation. Silently, in Yi Chen's soul sea, an extremely small seed with a hint of green was gradually born. He had successfully comprehended the law of wood. Opening his eyes, Yi Chen's pupils turned emerald green. However, the emerald color quickly receded and returned to normal. This is the law of wood. Yi Chen retracted his right hand and spread it out. A green light flashed, and a small tree grew out of Yi Chen's palm. The small tree rapidly grew, turning into a towering tree. The branches of the towering tree could be hard or soft. When they were hard, they were like steel. When they were soft, they were like vines. They could whip the void as they pleased, and their destructive power seemed to be even higher than the law of water. Of course, this was the initial stage of the law of water. The current level of the law of water was too high, comparable to the law of light of supremacy. The small tree in his palm vanished, and Yi Chen's body suddenly turned green, turning into a green shadow. The green shadow contained infinite vitality. Yi Chen had a feeling that even if he was hit countless times, he would be able to instantly recover. It wouldn't consume his martial Dao Yuan spirit at all, only the power of the law of wood. In terms of survivability, the law of wood is definitely not inferior to the powerful laws. It is only slightly weaker than the peak laws. It had been more than 10,000 years since he came to the primal chaos battlefield, and he had seen a lot of laws. As for the characteristics of each law, he more or less had some understanding. In terms of survivability alone, the wood law was extremely outstanding. What? The Greenhoof Battle Saint was awakened by the spreading law of wood. Seeing Yi Chen's transformation, he couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Did he really comprehend the law of wood? So simple? Bastard, this is too unfair. The Greenhoof Battle Saint was extremely jealous. He was a high-grade demigod, yet he hadn't comprehended a single law. Yet his opponent had comprehended too. How could he live? I'll let you be arrogant first. The fact that his opponent had comprehended the law of wood, while he had yet to break through, made the Greenhoof Battle Saint feel a sense of urgency. After comprehending the law of wood, Yi Chen could officially absorb the law of wood's fragments. The law of wood fragment in Yi Chen's soul sea was only the size of a sesame seed, while the one in the void was the size of a thumb. The difference between the two was huge. 100 years, 200 years, 500 years. After 500 years, the law of wood fragment in Yi Chen's soul sea was the size of a pinky finger. The one in the void was also the size of a pinky finger. More than half of it had been absorbed. I can't absorb anymore. Exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, Yi Chen's eyes flashed. Since water begets wood, and one could comprehend the law of wood, why couldn't wood beget fire, and comprehend the law of fire? As soon as he thought of this, Yi Chen approached the law of fire fragment. The law of fire fragment in the void was like a cluster of flames, swaying gently. Sensing Yi Chen's approach, the flames suddenly surged and turned into a towering wave of heat that swept over. Activating the law of wood, a lush and flourishing world of wood appeared around Yi Chen. When the wave of heat came in contact with this world of wood, it immediately ignited. However, when it was 10 meters away from Yi Chen, it was blocked by a green radiance. Withstanding this green radiance, Yi Chen slowly approached the flame. So hot! Yi Chen felt that his breath was boiling hot. However, this also deepened his communication with the law of fire fragment. If he wanted to comprehend it, he had to experience it. The law of fire was violent, scorching, expanding, and extremely wild. It was completely different from the reserved law of water and the calm law of wood. Chapter 1449. As time passed, Yi Chen felt as if he had turned into a ball of fire with no specific shape. Wherever the wind blew, he would run. Whenever he saw a tree, he would burn. When he saw a river, he would burn. When he saw a starry sky, he would also burn. At first, it was just a ball of fire, but later, it became a super flame that could destroy an entire galaxy, forming a world of its own. Visible sparks could be seen on Yi Chen's body, but there was no smoke. Boom! Yi Chen suddenly burst into flames. Even his eyeballs were burning, turning into pure flames. Law of fire complete. In his soul sea, a small flame was born, releasing heat that could not be ignored. Even faster, Yi Chen was moved. It took him about 200 years to comprehend the law of wood, but it only took him 150 years to comprehend the law of fire. However, there were 3 great laws in his soul sea, which added a lot of pressure. When he first comprehended the law of water, Yi Chen felt that it was too much. His soul sea could not contain it, but now it could contain 3 great laws. Yi Chen understood that this was because he had made multiple breakthroughs in the primal chaos battlefield. His martial Dao Yuan Shen had reached the quasi-gold level, and his sword intent and heart sword had also improved. All aspects had improved a lot, especially after comprehending the law of wood. Not only did it not increase the pressure, but it also made Yi Chen more energetic, constantly nourishing his soul sea. Activating the law of fire, Yi Chen turned into a flaming man. Whoosh! The flaming man flickered back and forth with great explosive power. Under the same realm, his speed was even faster than the water travel art. Rumble! A fireball condensed in his hand, and Yi Chen threw it out, causing a huge explosion. Damn, the law of fire is also complete. The Greenhoof Battle Saint's heart was not in a good mood. Jealousy gave him a strong desire to kill Yi Chen immediately. No, I can't kill him now. I have to wait for my martial will to break through to the late stage of the 9th order. It would be best if I can break through in other aspects as well. Shaking his head, the Greenhoof Battle Saint suppressed his desire to kill. Soon, my martial will break through at any time, and my foundation as a high-grade demigod has also stabilized. After comprehending the law of fire, Yi Chen began to absorb the law of fire fragments to strengthen his law of fire realm. After spending 400 years, the law of fire had reached its limit and could no longer be improved. Only a small portion of the law of fire remained. Naturally, Yi Chen shifted his attention to the law of earth fragment. Metal begets water, water begets wood, wood begets fire, fire begets earth, and earth begets metal. The 5 elements reinforced and restrained each other, forming a cycle. The gravity is so strong. The closer he got to the law of earth fragment, the heavier Yi Chen felt. Haha! My martial will has finally broken through to the late stage of the 9th rank, and my domain has also reached the late stage of the 9th level. Sword Venerable Green Lotus, let's fight again. At this moment a loud laugh was heard. It was the ancient Hoof War Saint. Without any warning, waves of black, viscous gas spread out from the ancient Hoof War Saint and enveloped Yi Chen. This was the ancient Hoof War Saint's Blackhorn domain. The might of a high-ranked demigod activating the late-stage 9th level domain was simply too great. Caught off guard, Yi Chen was rendered immobile. Green Lotus Sword Domain Rise! A green lotus bloomed on Yi Chen's body, but it withered as soon as it bloomed. The difference in the power of their domains was too great. World of Water, World of Wood, World of Fire, World of Earth, Green Lotus Sword Domain. First there were ripples, followed by the growth of the forest, followed by the sweeping of flames, and then ashes fell to the ground, forming a piece of land. Finally a green lotus bloomed, relying on the 4 worlds of laws, and the Green Lotus Sword Domain. Yi Chen finally broke through the ancient Hoof War Saint's Black Cove domain. Not only that, but the 4 worlds of laws and the Green Lotus Sword Domain worked together to suppress the ancient Hoof War Saint's Black Cove domain. The ancient Hoof War Saint's momentum suddenly stagnated, no longer as domineering as before. Take my fist. The ancient Hoof War Saint narrowed his eyes and punched out. This punch contained an incomparably powerful, will as if it could pierce through space-time. A late-stage 9th rank martial will. Just in time. Yi Chen unsheathed the firmament sword and welcomed the incoming attack. This sword was not the billow sword, but had water radiance, flame radiance, green radiance, and yellow radiance, containing the power of 4 great laws. Although the 4 laws could not be fused together, which was something only a true god could do, when used together, the power was not as simple as 1 + 1. Chapter 1450. The law of water filled the law of wood with vitality. The law of wood strengthened the law of fire, and the law of fire strengthened the law of earth. In the end, the firmament sword turned into an earthen mountain that smashed down on the Green Hoof War Saint. Boom! The void paused for a moment. Then boundless ripples spread out and struck Yi Chen and the Green Hoof War Saint. Yi Chen's immortal sword physique was enough to block the attacks of a mid-ranked demigod. Coupled with the mystic tortoise sacred armor, ordinary high-ranked demigods couldn't do anything to him. The boundless ripples sent Yi Chen flying, but they didn't injure Yi Chen at all. Freeze! Yi Chen roared, and a layer of earthen armor condensed on his body. This was the armor of earth. The moment the armor formed, Yi Chen felt as if he was rooted in the void. The boundless ripples pushed him away, but couldn't move him in the slightest. On the other hand, the Green Hoof War Saint spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. In terms of offense, the Green Hoof War Saint was stronger than Yi Chen. Even though Yi Chen had 4 great laws, he was much weaker than Yi Chen in terms of defense. Yi Chen could resist the boundless ripples, but the Green Hoof War Saint couldn't. Of course, this was only a small loss. Spitting out blood wasn't even an injury to a high-ranked demigod. It was merely a waste of energy. How can this be? The Green Hoof War Saint couldn't believe it. His offense was higher than Yi Chen's, but in terms of overall strength, Yi Chen was above him. Defense was also a part of one's strength. Green Hoof War Saint, take another slash from me. Withstanding the boundless ripples, Yi Chen slashed at the Green Hoof War Saint once more. The earthen mountain tore through the boundless ripples and heavily smashed into the Green Hoof War Saint. The Green Hoof War Saint was sent flying like a shooting star. With 4 great laws, Yi Chen no longer feared high-ranked demigods. Even against the best of them, Yi Chen was confident he could escape unscathed. The battle between the two of them lasted for 100 years. Neither was willing to back down. Although the Green Hoof War Saint was being suppressed, as a high-ranked demigod, his origin energy was powerful, and his martial soul was nearly indestructible. Yi Chen would have a hard time injuring him, let alone killing him. In comparison, Yi Chen's defense was even more monstrous. With the immortal sword body and the black tortoise sacred armor, Yi Chen was able to resist the attacks of the ancient Hoof War Saint. Coupled with the earth armor, the saint's attacks were no different from tickles to Yi Chen. Taking a step back, even if the first 3 couldn't stop the ancient Hoof War Saint, Yi Chen could still turn incorporeal and ignore the majority of the damage. The Law of Wood could also allow Yi Chen to instantly recover. Even if he didn't die, he would still lose a layer of skin. After all, who knew what kind of monstrous progress one would make in comprehending the 5 elemental laws? The 15th underground floor had only entrances and exits. There was a passage when one entered, but it would disappear after entering. The Green Hoof War Saint flew toward the edge of the 15th floor, looking for an exit. 700 years. 1,000 years. 2,000 years. Time passed quickly. Soon, it had been 20,000 years since Yi Chen came to the 15th underground floor. On this day, Yi Chen's body emitted a dazzling golden light, as if he had turned into a golden man. In his soul sea, a grain-sized metal sphere was born. It emitted a sharp golden light, and formed a ring with the other 4 great law fragments. Perhaps for an instant, perhaps for an eternity, a faint layer of 5-colored light flickered on Yi Chen's body. Every time it flickered, Yi Chen felt his body sublimate. Crackle! Miraculously, Yi Chen's spirit body advanced from peak rank 9 to perfection. Ever since then, his spirit body had reached its limit, and could no longer be improved, unless he became a true god and condensed a divine body. His immortal sword body did not break through. It was still at the 18th level, but without a doubt, he had reached the peak. The 5-colored light not only changed Yi Chen's physique, but it also increased the speed of refining the divine blood by millions of times. However, the 5-colored light was also consumed quickly. In the blink of an eye, it was gone. Yi Chen took a deep breath and began to absorb the metal law fragment. Right now, the level of the metal law was still very weak. It was not on par with the other 4 great laws. When the level of the metal law increased, the 5-colored light should be more. The only pity was that he did not have enough divine blood. He had just consumed a lot of it, and he did not know if it could provide enough nutrition. Comprehending the metal law was difficult, but absorbing the metal law fragment was much easier. Every time he absorbed a strand of the metal law fragment, the 5-colored light on Yi Chen's body would appear once. Yi Chen felt that he was getting closer and closer to becoming a primary demigod. It was as if there was only a thin veil between them, and when it was lifted, a new world would appear. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.